Most people think hearing loss only affects conversations, but here's the truth that no one talks about. Hearing loss affects your income, your long-term career path, and your retirement savings, even your lifetime net worth. As an audiologist, I've watched patients lose anywhere from $10,000 to over $100,000 in lifetime earnings simply because their hearing loss went untreated. Not because they weren't skilled, but because they didn't realize small communication gaps were costing them financially, socially, and professionally. Today, I'm going to explain exactly why hearing loss quietly drains wealth, how it shows up in your daily work routines, and what you can do to protect both your hearing and your financial future.
Section 1. Hearing loss. Quietly shrinks your income. Let's start with the simplest question. Why does hearing loss affect wealth? Because hearing loss directly impacts communication, and communication controls nearly every part of your professional life. When you struggle to hear, you also struggle with job performance, workplace relationships, confidence, leadership presence, and even subtle things like tone, timing, and response accuracy. Most people don't realize that even mild hearing loss can lead to missing key details in meetings, mishearing instructions, misinterpreting client feedback, or zoning out during discussions because your brain is trying to piece sounds together. You may think you're keeping up, but studies show many people with untreated hearing loss lose up to 25% of their annual income simply because communication becomes harder and less consistent. And here's the important point. Hearing loss does not make you less intelligent. It simply makes communication more effortful, and workplaces reward people who communicate clearly, confidently, and without hesitation. When hearing becomes a struggle, income almost always follows. Section 2. Untreated hearing loss creates subtle career problems that build up slowly over time, often without the person realizing what's happening. One of the most common issues I hear is, I stopped speaking up in meetings. When someone isn't fully confident they heard the question correctly, they stay quiet. Quiet employees are often overlooked, even if they're brilliant. Others say, I avoid phone calls now. Phone conversations are harder for people with hearing loss because voices are compressed and background noise gets mixed in. As a result, they start choosing email instead. But higher level roles require more verbal communication, not less. Then there's the phrase I hear far too often, I pretend to understand. People smile, nod, laugh at the right times, all while hoping they didn't just agree to something incorrect. Pretending eventually leads to mistakes, and those mistakes show up in performance reviews. Networking also becomes stressful because noisy rooms make speech harder to decode. So people stop attending, which means they stop building relationships that lead to promotions, mentorships, and high-value opportunities. On top of that, hearing loss causes mental fatigue. By the end of the workday, the brain feels exhausted from trying to fill in blanks, energy that should have gone toward productivity and creativity. All of these factors create hidden career costs that accumulate year after year. Section 3. The cognitive toll. Hearing loss forces the brain to work much harder to decode distorted or incomplete sound signals. Instead of processing information effortlessly, your brain has to guess, interpret, and reconstruct missing pieces of speech. Over time, this constant effort reduces mental energy available for memory, concentration, and quick decision-making. A tired brain becomes slower, less accurate, and more prone to communication errors. In meetings, this shows up as difficulty remembering details, missing subtle cues, or struggling to follow fast discussions. It's not that the person's intelligence changes, it's that so much of the brain's bandwidth is being used just to hear. This cognitive strain leads to a cycle where people feel less confident, more anxious in conversations, and more hesitant to participate. All of this directly impacts job performance and long-term career growth. When your brain is overloaded just trying to hear, it simply can't operate at its best. Section 4, Hearing Loss and Lifetime Wealth. Now let's talk about the financial impact over decades, because this is where hearing loss becomes a serious wealth issue. A person in their 40s, 50s, or early 60s with untreated hearing loss might experience small performance problems each year. Fewer raises, slower promotions, choosing less demanding roles, or retiring earlier due to stress and exhaustion. What feels like a small career shift becomes a major financial loss over time. Someone who avoids leadership roles because they struggle to hear may miss out on higher salaries and bigger bonuses. Someone who steps away from the workforce earlier than planned may lose not just income, but years of investment growth. Meanwhile, the person who treats their hearing loss early experiences a completely different financial trajectory. They stay confident in meetings, maintain strong communication skills, perform consistently, handle leadership responsibilities with ease, and stay in the workforce longer if they choose. One decision, to treat or ignore hearing loss, separates two dramatically different financial futures. Section 5, the wealth equation. Many people view hearing aids as an expense, and that mindset is exactly what gets them into financial trouble. Hearing aids are not a luxury. They're a wealth-preserving tool, just like glasses, dental care, education, or maintaining your car. You invest in these things because they keep your most valuable asset, your ability to function, working properly. Ignoring hearing loss is what costs money. Treating hearing loss protects income, increases confidence, prevents mistakes, and keeps people competitive in the workforce. When you think about hearing treatments as tools that safeguard communication, and therefore safeguard earning potential, the value becomes incredibly clear. Section 6, what you can do right now. Fortunately, protecting both your hearing and your financial future is simple if you take the right steps. First, get a proper hearing evaluation. Even mild loss creates challenges at work. Next, treat hearing loss early. Most people wait 7 to 10 years before seeking help, and those years are often when the biggest financial losses occur. Once you begin treatment, use hearing aids consistently so your brain gets stable, continuous sound input. This strengthens cognitive performance, reduces fatigue, and improves workplace communication dramatically. You can also advocate for yourself by adjusting your work environment, choosing strategic seating in meetings, using captions on Zoom calls, or reducing background noise during important discussions. And finally, protect your hearing. Preventing additional damage is always easier and far cheaper than correcting it later.
I've met hundreds of patients who believe something was wrong with their memory, their attention, or even their intelligence, only to discover that their brain was simply overwhelmed from trying to hear. Once their hearing was treated, their clarity, confidence, and performance returned almost immediately. Hearing loss doesn't make you less capable. It just makes communication harder, and communication can always be improved. If you found this helpful, subscribe for more videos on hearing loss, tinnitus, and tools that actually work. And if you're anywhere near Durham, North Carolina, we'd be happy to see you in our clinic for a full hearing evaluation.